School lunch challenge. Today we were given a sandwich, some milk, orange juice and orange, and some goldfish graham crackers. So we're gonna go ahead and turn this into an orange pudding trifle. And a trifle is just a fancy word for a layered pudding dessert. So we're gonna get rid of the sandwich and we're gonna measure out our milk and our orange juice. We're gonna go ahead and measure out 3 ounces of orange juice. So we want to go ahead and look at the measure. Okay, so our measure right here, 2 ounces and 4 ounces. I don't have a middle line, so I'm going to go ahead right into the middle as best I can estimate. And I'm going to use a large bowl for this that is microwavable safe, putting my 3 ounces of orange juice into the bowl. I'm gonna go ahead and put in another 3 ounces of milk. And so it's gonna be kind of like an orange creamsicle, which will be really good. So measure it up right in between the 2 and the 4 for the 3 ounces. Okay, looking at that level, and then adding that into my orange juice as well. In 1/2 tablespoon, so 1/2 of a tablespoon of butter, and it will melt when it's in. Now I want to add in some sugar. So I've got 2 tablespoons of sugar measured, and I want to add in some cornstarch. So puddings typically will be made with a cornstarch, nice and creamy. And we'll get that in there. Okay, whisk this around and make sure there's no lumps. We're going to set it aside and we're going to go ahead and zest our orange. So the orange that I got today, all right, the outer color of the orange is the zest, and that's where all the oils lie and where all of the good flavor from the orange is. So we want to make sure there's orange in the orange juice, but also amplify or really extend the flavor with the orange zest. You can simply go ahead and take a peeler, and instead of taking the peeler like this, you're going to kind of rock it in the back. So catch your orange and bring it down along the rounded edge. So you can see you get this really nice long strip, but also there's no white. So as you get into the white, this is called the pith, it's going to be really bitter and not very pleasant tasting, but this is where all the flavor is. So because this is so large, I'm going to pull it out when it's done, but microwaving it, it'll bring out the oil and add to the flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for 3 strips of orange. I'm going to be using my orange as well. We'll do that after the pudding is made and cooling. So I just add in the orange, and I'm going to put this in the microwave for 1 minute to get it hot and start to thicken the cornstarch. So you can see I put it in for 1 minute. It's starting to get hot, but it hasn't thickened yet, and I really want it to thicken with that cornstarch. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in for another minute. Okay, so this is another minute. And you can see it's starting to get pretty thick. So right now I've got a nice velvety looking custard. I'm gonna very carefully with my fork now remove these orange pieces, because the orange is only gonna infuse so much in the hot liquid. Once I start to thicken it, it becomes a little harder to take out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and scoop that out. And if you notice as I'm taking it out, it really does have a lot of shine from the butter. That helped to kind of thicken it and make some butter fat to it. So I'm going to take the glass measuring cup that I used, set aside my mixture, and your bowl may be hot when it comes out of the microwave. And I'm going to take an egg and I'm going to crack it. Don't crack it on the side of your container. Always crack it on a flat surface so that the shell doesn't poke in and break the yolk. Then go ahead and separate it into your measuring container. So into that. So you want to whip up your egg with your fork. Because we're not using a mixer of any kind, it's going to take a little while, but you want this to get smooth and you want it to be a little bit foamy, and then we're going to add in our hot liquid. So let's go ahead and keep mixing. All right, so I've got it nice and smooth. I'm breaking it apart, okay? And I'm going to add in a little bit of my thickened custard. So as I pour, and this is called tempering. We want to slowly heat up the egg so that I don't put it back into the microwave and have the egg curdle and turn into scrambled eggs. That would really not be tasty. So I want to feel this measuring cup get a little warm, I'm gonna keep adding in my custard. And depending on how far you had taken it to thicken, you might end up adding the whole thing in. So I ended up adding almost all of this back in. And I'm gonna add it back into my bowl, kind of mixing as I go. I can already feel it getting thick from just the heat. And I'm gonna put it into the microwave another 45 seconds to a minute. So I went 45 seconds on my microwave, and I'm gonna go ahead and stir it around. You can see how much more it thickened, but I didn't want it to curdle. So I'm really gonna get in there, and then I wanna set it aside while I'm doing my oranges and get it cooling. So you can see that that's kind of a runny pudding, but it's still hot. As it cools, it will thicken. We look good. So now next, I'm gonna go ahead and set that aside. And I'm gonna take the orange that I had left over with a small serrated knife, just because I happen to like a serrated knife. And I'm gonna cut off the outer skin, okay? And ultimately, I'm gonna segment or supreme my oranges, but you can also just cut them into rounds as well. If you're afraid of using the knife or you're not allowed to use the knife, you can simply peel it like you would peel it for eating, and then you'll have the little segments to yourself, but they will still have the membrane around them and they don't look as pretty. So for my culinary students, you should be remembering how to supreme any citrus, where we take our serrated knife, our utility knife, or a nice sharp paring knife, and we go down around the bulb of the citrus, getting all of that pith off of it. So if you have any additional pith, go back around and take that, break that apart. So now I've removed all of that rind, and we're gonna set it aside. Because I zested it, I'm not gonna utilize it, but I have the orange itself. So if you took an orange and just peeled it, you can simply go ahead straight down and make a little round or a circle. But if you wanna practice, if you look inside the orange, you can see these little white sections, and that's the membrane that's separating the segment. That's what ends up getting stringy and chewy. So if you take your knife very carefully, because you are going into your hand, do not do this if you do not have permission. I don't want to get a message saying you hurt yourself. But that little white part right there, supreming. So my culinary students, you know the drill. Getting in there, okay, making sure you get in between each membrane, kind of like flipping a notebook, going in and getting that out. And it's a much nicer way to eat your citrus. And you're gonna take your seeds out, so simply just make sure that you remove any seeds. Okay, so now we have our supremed or our segmented orange pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead now and build my trifle. I wiped off my board, just simply taking the graham cracker and breaking it up. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and spoon in some of my pudding so that I make decorative layers. Okay, as I'm adding in the pudding, then I'm gonna go ahead and add in a couple of my oranges. Okay, we typically start with the crumb on the bottom and we end with the filling on the top in my last portion of my pudding. And I'm gonna go ahead and just take that little wheel that I cut off and place that right on the top. We're gonna let that chill in the refrigerator for about a half an hour. You want the pudding to get cold. It really will bring out the flavor of the orange and be much nicer and thicker as it gets cold. So you're gonna have to wait, but make it before dinner and then it's ready after dinner, and we'll see how it comes out at the end. Okay, so it's been about a half an hour. Maybe I couldn't wait. But if you notice, we've got some nice layering inside. Our pudding has thickened and set. And that's gonna be delicious. School lunch challenge, once again accepted.